Hello, and welcome to Training for Transformation, changing what people do by changing what they know, presented by SAP Litmos. With us today, we have two presenters, Samantha Lang and Jennifer Kling. Samantha is the content director for SAP Litmos. She has contributed to business software marketing teams for nearly 20 years, specializing in messaging, content creation, branding, and creative strategy. She entered the e-learning industry in 2015 when she joined Litmos and continues to grow her interest and knowledge in the space. She holds a BA in English from Fordham University and an MFA in creative writing from American University. Jennifer is the Vice President of Marketing for SAP Litmos with over 25 years of experience in sales and marketing roles in the high tech industry. She is passionate about empowering teams to be productive while being their authentic self. So let's please welcome Jennifer and Samantha to the session. I'm going to hand it over to both of them. They can start sharing their screen, and the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I think just Sam's gonna get her screen share on and come on
I'm
camera.
getting my video on here. Just seems to be taking a second. There we go. There we go. Oops. Thank you, Melissa, for the intros. We appreciate that. And let's jump right on in. So, pretty simple agenda today. We've only broken it up into 4 areas. So we're going to talk about what training for transformation is, and we're going to give a brief history of kind of where that term came from and the background there. And then we're going to talk about, from the Litmos perspective, sort of our take on transformational training and the next gen of that term. And then we're going to give you some strategies, some suggestions on how you might, start to launch a transformational training organization and what that means. And we'll discuss some ideas around that. We're going to do a couple of polls, and we would love to have your questions and your feedback. So here we go. So obviously, and it's so nice to see people from around the world on the webinar today. Obviously, worldwide, we have been undergoing a truly transformative time, in unprecedented, I would imagine, in most of our lifetimes or all of our lifetimes. Obviously, the number one item, the pandemic, which reared its ugly head, resulting economic crises that happened often as a result of changes due to the pandemic. And then social unrest. Certainly here in the US, we had obviously a ton of social unrest, but that's not limited to the US. And then massive global political change, again, US, and for those of you from around the world, in many, many places. So here we are, and what happened as a result of a lot of those things is that training rose to a new level of importance for companies. And yeah, in the past, training is like, yeah, we do that, it's nice to have. But what started to happen when all of these different transformational situations happened, all of a sudden companies realized, oh boy, it's time to focus on training.
Yeah, and Sam, it's funny because I think, you talked about, we've got people from all over the world on this call right now, and everyone is in different stages of this pandemic, right? So we're continuing to see different areas of the world that are still trying to come out of it, and still dealing with the impacts of the pandemic, and then the ripple effect that that's having on the economy and social inequities, and of course also all the political changes. So we're definitely seeing that. But what's fascinating is the importance that it seems to have highlighted for many companies, as far as the investment in learning. All of the sudden, March last year, when companies were having their employees work remote, having some sort of learning platform, as you said, no longer was a nice to have, it became mandatory. So we saw this huge increase in last year, an investment in learning platforms. I think this number of seeing an increase in spend to $446 billion, that's with it should be with a capital B, globally, really shows that this is, highlighted the importance that many companies are starting to see of being able to train their employees to be able to deal with these things. And I think as we, think about what that means, what it means to people, what it means to companies, truly is a transformative time. If we want to go on to, I don't know if you want to go on to the next slide.
I am, Jen. I'm trying to get it to go, and I don't know why.
Not clicking.
Oh, no, why do I have to?
The other thing we've seen is that technology doesn't always work the way we want it to. But I think from a litmus standpoint, one of the things that we've looked at as we communicate with our customers and within the community, and we talk about this transformation, we've sort of changed talking about training in the now to really training for transformation, shifting to all of these key priorities that we saw. And if we think about what was driven and forced upon us because of the situations of last year, it made training far more critical for health and safety protocols and all these other different things as companies tried to adapt to what was happening with the pandemic. So as we're talking with the community, Litmus is really going to be talking more about training for transformation. And Sam, I know you've got some points that you wanted to make as well, but I think that this is the crux of where we're at today in this space, in the L&D space, that I'm sure everyone on the call can relate to.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of these bullets later in the talk today, but I mean, major changes as far as priorities regarding, how companies not only perceive training, but really what it does to transform a business and how critical it has become. And again, we're gonna get into some of those details. But our point from the Litmus perspective, and in fact, Jen, I don't know if we won't bore you too much, but we actually just changed our tagline at Litmus to training for transformation. That's how important we think it is and how meaningful it is. And as this very simple statement says, it really is now, it's about transforming people for greater purpose and performance. And we're going to talk about the purpose part, we're going to talk about the performance part and how they're related. But you transform people, and then obviously as a result, you can transform the organization. And our business, our partners over at SuccessFactors, who I think a lot of you are probably familiar with SAP SuccessFactors, and Litmus and SuccessFactors have teamed up now, and they have this great phrase that I have to note, but that purpose drives people and people drive business performance. And that's really the crux of what we're talking about, is purpose drives people. Because if people don't feel connected, they're probably not going to be performing at their best.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I think about I think it was Steve Jobs. I hope I'm not misquoting who said this. But when you talk about what's important, customers or employees, and I think it was Steve Jobs had said, take care of your employees, and that they'll take care of the rest, right? So truly transforming people. And as we say in the title of the webinar, right, it's about what they do is based on what they know. And for that greater purpose, both personally as an individual, but then also their place within the organization, their purpose within the organization. And that's what's going to lead to results. And, if you're in learning and development, that's at your core, that's what you're responsible for and are able to drive within the organization. That's your contribution to the organization.
And I love this so much. And I can't wait to get into more of it. But so as we talk about the history of this term, transformational training, Litmus is certainly, we are not going to take credit for talking about training in the context of transformation. the term was actually introduced by this gentleman, Peter Drucker, in 1999. That was the original, the original philosophy. And the philosophy was that, well, to oversimplify his philosophy, it was that the companies that are going to be successful have to switch from just focusing on individual skills in training and broaden the idea to a more knowledge-based training. So not one-off skills, broaden someone's greater understanding, and then also the purpose part becomes important when we modernize this term. But that's the origin of where this term came from. And I think we're going to have a poll, because I'm very curious to know of everybody on the call today who was familiar. I think this is our poll. Here we go. If we can launch this, and I'm just curious, I know Jen's curious, if you are familiar with the term transformational training. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, if anyone has read any Peter Drucker books, I know, I've been in management leadership for more years than I want to say, and have read several of his books. And, he certainly talks a lot about people and ensuring people have purpose and belonging, and as leaders, our role in that. But I personally am not sure that I recall ever reading him specifically talk about transformational training. So it'll be interesting to hear if I'm sure there are other people on the call who also have read some of his books if they're in leadership. And it looks like so far it's pretty split.
Pretty a little heavier on the no side,
Yeah.
but close. About half of you have heard it. Maybe that's why you joined us today, is because you were familiar with the term.
Oh, it's growing. The no's are growing.
Oh, there they go.
I think people are saying, okay, good, I'm not alone.
There are no stupid poll answers.
Yes. That's great. Well, I think we've got about 75% of the poll in. So that's, there we go. Yeah, more. Yep, there we go.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Thank you for participating. Yeah, we're a little heavier on the no side, which I guess doesn't necessarily surprise me, but interesting. But many of you have heard of the term. Cool.
Yeah, very interesting.
And then, Melissa, do I need to close that, or can we?
I think it's.
I just closed it. Should
Oh,
have
okay.
disappeared for everyone. Maybe still on for you, but everyone else.
There we go. Boy, I'm having some technical issues today, aren't I? Okay, let me move these forward. I am sorry, the slides are not moving the way I want them to. Oh boy.
Well, I think as we go on, maybe because the poll's still open, I just got a comment from the chat saying the poll's still open.
Yeah, I'm trying to advance our slides. I apologize, guys. We're trying to move these forward and it is not. I wonder, Melissa, if you can make Jen the presenter, if I'm having some issues here advancing the slides, or no, because I'm sharing my screen.
Yeah, you can make.
Switch.
Yeah, Jennifer, if you have the slide deck, I mean, you're both co-hosts, so
why don't I do that,
switch
Jen?
to Jennifer.
Yeah, it just seems like I'm having some issues because they're not advancing for me. I'm going to stop my share. Is that okay, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Except you don't have this deck.
That's okay. I'm just missing the poll slide. We'll survive.
Is there, I am sorry about this.
That's okay.
They're just not advancing for me.
I think we've got, I think I'm sharing now, so I think we're good.
Okay.
Everybody, do you see my screen yet?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Apologies, folks.
It's okay. Let's see. Oh, I'm not on the right slide though. There we go.
Oh,
so
and actually, yeah, there we go. That's where we were.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, continuing to talk about Drucker and transformational training and his method and what he talks about. We're not going to read this whole quote to you, but it is it's so important to talk about the upscaling that's needed in an organization, and directing employees, providing that training for employees so that they can upskill. But all of that's what helps create the transformational culture. Without training that's being rolled out in the organization, how else are you going to be able to make an impact on your employees upscaling, as well as improve their productivity? So it's not just about the skill, but about enabling them to be able to be productive and being able to perform at a higher level with the knowledge that they need about your company, about the objectives, about your product, about how to deal with current situations, how to all of those things. It all plays together in a fully formed learning and development plan.
Yeah, and even though, I mean, this quote is quite a mouthful, I think the really, really important part of it is that the last sentence there, is that it really, it has to enable employees to perform at a higher level. And, and it's a broader approach, as you're saying, Jen, it's a broader approach than just, one-off skills application.
Right.
So.
Absolutely.
Well, I can launch into this one if you don't mind, Jen. I think we at SAP Litmus we kind of want to introduce the idea of just taking the idea of transformative training and taking it a little bit further and also modernizing it. So again, as we were talking about Mr. Drucker introducing the term in 1999, well, in 1999, the term digital transformation didn't really exist. I mean, not in the business context. I think what I read is that the term digital transformation, as far as most of us would consider it today, was probably launched around 2010, maybe early 2000s, but definitely by 2010, the way that we think of it now, as far as totally transforming every area of your business as a result of technology. So it'd be interesting to hear what Mr. Drucker would have said about this. But when he was talking about transformational training, this is pre-digital transformation. And when you think of it in that context of like how digital everything sits at the foundation of every piece of every successful business right now, and then adding that layer of meaning to like transformational training that's powered by technology and the massive and rapid development of learning technologies that are out there, and how that changes the term transformational training.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about digital transformation, and I read an article talked about, we've talked about digital transformation and digital evolution, but it had different meaning in the 1940s and 50s, when it was truly being, the concept of computers was truly being introduced. Whereas now it's about, it's so closely tied with the business transformation, right? Companies have been talking about transforming their business, for the last decade and a half or so. And it's the digital transformation that's really driving the business transformation. And it's no surprise that it has a huge impact on training, massive impact, right? So when we talk about that, we're talking specifically about the LMS. This is obviously not where we're saying introducing the LMS, right? This has been around. This is not a fresh concept, obviously, right? And as you may or may not be aware, Litmus is a provider of an LMS. I promise this is not where we go into a sales pitch. I don't want to see the participants suddenly start dropping. Please don't, because this is the last we'll say of it. As well as we provide an off-the-shelf content or course library as well. And it's something that obviously many companies pre-pandemic have been investing in.
Yeah, and I think what what the pandemic did is that even for companies that had an LMS, have an LMS or some kind of LXP or whatever, some kind of central learning technology, is that they were still really some of the analyst firms that we work with, the data shows that a lot of companies pre-pandemic were relying much more heavily on in-person training, which might be surprising to some folks, but that's what the data shows, is that most companies were doing the majority of their training in person, even though they also have an LMS. So that may be a surprising stat for folks, but what happened obviously was then that wasn't possible anymore, given what we've been through in the last year.
Right, absolutely. Speaking of last
Well,
year.
there we go. Along came 2020, and it, as the first bullet there says, the companies that were using it, maybe a quarter of their training program was e-learning. Well, 2020 made it such that if it didn't become 100% of your learning program, I mean, you'd either have to just bring your training mostly to a halt, which not an ideal time, clearly, with people not knowing what was going to happen and maybe feeling pretty disconnected from the company. And now I'm at home, and how do I even work? How do I work, much less do training? And it became a time that the companies that responded really, really well, and we have several customer case studies of companies. Some companies responded really, really well and really, really quickly to do things like roll out some of these bullets here, brand new health and safety stuff, brand new policies. How do I work from home? What do I do? What new systems are in place? What policies am I supposed to follow? What are the new rules for working remotely? And clearly a ton of reskilling and upskilling for people whose jobs changed dramatically as a result. So the LMS became even more critical as a communication channel, as a way to just get information out to people. And that was a major, major important change that happened last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a comment in the chat about, someone talking about how they had a blend of OLT and ILT in the past 5 years. And I think the companies that were already doing a blend of virtual and in-person training probably had a little bit of an easier time adjusting last year. But it certainly, I'm sure even in those cases, companies who were already doing virtual and virtual training online, still had to make changes on the fly based on what we were seeing last year, and making that shift. But certainly, if you had a blend prior to last year, then making that shift was probably a lot easier for you if you already had that blend as we went into this, what became, if we already said unprecedented, the next item you can mark off of your bingo card is new normal. Because that happened very quickly, and we've all had to adapt very quickly to this new normal, right?
Yeah, and one thing I think we should mention too is that we've been focusing on employees, but a lot of Litmus customers don't just use Litmus to train their employees; they use it to train their customers, to train their partners, their extended enterprise, if you will, and so even relying more heavily on that across different audiences, and being able to use technology to keep people in communication, to keep people informed of what's going on, new ways of doing business. How do I, what do I need to be trained on in order to continue to do business if in fact you were? And but as a result of a lot of those rapid and sometimes quite jarring changes, a lot of really good things, if we're going to do the silver lining here, a lot of really good things did come as a result. And companies started polling and surveying their customers, partners, what have you, and they found out that actually a lot of people prefer they prefer e-learning, and they're like, great. I don't have to go get on a plane and sit in a conference room for 6 hours and leave my real job, for maybe days at a time and lose all that productivity, which of course we all know you're going to have to catch up on when you're out of your normal work environment. And so companies learn that people are like, yeah, we actually like this. It's good. It's okay. And then the data started coming in that in fact the outcomes were just as good, if not better as well, that people were retaining information and were being able to learn in the flow of work, even though they're often people's roles were disrupted a bit, but that the outcomes were quite good and are continue to be quite good. And then of course the really obvious one that many companies were having their aha moment was, we don't have to spend nearly as much money to go put everybody on planes and rent the conference room and pay for all the hotels and pay for all the expenditures. And so it was kind of a no-brainer of a lot of companies switching to more e-learning because of the cost and time savings as well.
Yeah, I think, it's not a surprise. I think we can all relate to some degree. There's been something that we've changed personally over the last year that we're going to continue to do, right? I'm going to continue to have my groceries delivered because I find it convenient, right? People who are, going to, you see, SAP, for example, is going to allow employees to continue to work from home if they choose, if it works for them. So there's, as extremely challenging as the last year has been and continues to still be for many, there certainly are some lessons learned. We actually, I'm going to call an audible, Sam. We have a question here in the Q&A that I think fits well at this point. And the question is, with so many changes happening so fast, it's getting harder to capture the attention of the trainee. For the first time, then making sure the new skills and attitudes sticks over the weeks and months. All that primarily requires simplification. Any ideas on that? I think it's easy for us to say, that everyone has been able to see the silver lining and it's been all fantastic for everyone. Certainly that's not, a blanket statement across the board. It is challenging, right? When you have a program that is typically in person, you people travel all over the country, or even to another country for a 2-day training event. You can't just suddenly expect that to transfer into a 2-day virtual event, right? So, and then even existing virtual programs that you have that you're trying to roll out, because everyone is in front of that screen all day, and they're on their own, you do have to find new ways to be able to keep it engaging and being able to help people be able to get the best out of that training. I'd love to see in the chat if people want to share some of the things that they have done in their companies to help capture the intention of the trainee and retain it and help with that retention. I'll share a little bit. I know that in some cases, we've had companies where even with what they were already doing online, they're shortening the content, providing shorter snippets of content for their learners, because attention spans are a little bit, are shorter. I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen. And Sam, feel free to chime in if there's anything else that comes to mind for you. But I know even myself personally, that the more concise that that content is, the more likely I'm going to absorb it the first time. And then having the reinforcement training that's following after that is also critical.
Yeah, we've seen a lot in the last year about digital fatigue. To go back to Vijay's question there, and it's just hard to capture attention, and especially because digital fatigue is a real thing and people are burned out of just staring at a screen all day. So I would agree that that micro learning in the flow of work, and we can refer to this again on an upcoming slide here, but being able to integrate, the easiest example is with CRM. So being able to integrate people's learning into a system that they're already in, they can get the information they need quickly. It doesn't feel as much like driving that burnout of like, oh, now I have to go log into this other system. I mean, we're going to talk about this more again with Litmus, but enabling it to feel more effective in the flow of work, I think is one way to capture that attention versus, making it a really cumbersome, oh, now I have to go over here and do an hour core, where people just get burned out on that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm seeing some great dialogue in the chat as well. I love the stories. Stories are what people remember. Super practical examples is always good. I love engaging existing staff to lead training. Once upon a time in my career, I was a sales leader, and I found that the best way to get salespeople to listen and believe was when they heard it from one of their peers, right? So I love that idea of engaging staff to help lead training of their peers. That's, it's get, much more credibility when you do that, and is usually more engaging. So I love that. There's some great things in here in the chat. I love it.
Yeah, so good. And we'll talk a little bit more about integration and stuff like that. But I'm sure we have Litmus customers on the call, but you can integrate with Zoom, integrate with web conferencing, where people do get to see each other's faces. It's not just an asynchronous learning event. It's more collaborative and communicative, and then you can do some of that peer-to-peer coaching or team coaching, that type of thing, and that also really helps with retention. If people have to come back, let's say a week, 2 weeks after they've done some kind of training, and then they can come back and have like a study group or some kind of web conferencing situation where it reinforces that information. We also use a feature called Boost in Litmus that's basically hitting somebody's phone. You can hit somebody's mobile with a quiz question, a follow-up after the training, and then you're reinforcing what they learned, and you can just send it as a text message, as just a little quiz, a little boost, to reinforce whatever information they were trained on.
Absolutely. Well, let's carry on. I mean, I think talking about stories. I love telling stories about what some of our customers have done. This is a story, Taronga City it's New Zealand, right, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's New Zealand. Yeah.
They last year they were in a situation where they needed to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour to no virtual training at all to needing to offer 100% training. And within 2 weeks, they were able to launch their training program online, bring 900 users online right away, and be able to roll out content that really helped with dealing with the pandemic and what was happening, but also being able to continue with their normal training program, if you will, while going virtual, and needing to be able to do so within such a short time frame.
I love that. And I mean, the chat from Lisa, we're going to talk more about this, Lisa, but the idea of what Lisa wrote is learn what problems the learners solve regularly, and then linking the training to how they can use it to solve those problems. That creative thinking of learning how to navigate a new situation, it's high. This is really one of the key points about transformational training, is that, again, it's not about one skill. It's about, okay, how can you use the knowledge that you have, or how can learners use the knowledge that they have to actually solve a unique problem? That's really, I mean, Lisa, that you practically summed it up for us there. to be able to do that critical and creative thinking, and yeah, it's fantastic.
Absolutely. And I think that the segue is good too, right? We're going to talk a little bit more about technology and how the technology drives the transformation. And there's, as we said before, right, LMS is not new. But as Sam referenced earlier, what we want to talk about is sort of like what this next gen looks like, and what we need to consider as we're rolling out training, training for transformation.
Yeah. And, I just wanted to note on this one, Jen, that like we're talking a lot about performance, how training affects job performance, but there are the other nuanced things like job satisfaction. We talked about purpose, people being more engaged, if you give people a broader knowledge versus a one-off skill, that it actually increases job satisfaction. And then speaking again about the extended enterprise, deeper connection from your partners, deeper commitment from your customers. It can really be applied across all those different areas of your business, in addition to employees.
Absolutely.
Oh boy, well, here we go. I've already kind of jumped the gun and talked a little bit about integration, and we can talk more about that. But the mobile thing is like, we know in L&D, everybody knows that they're supposed to be doing mobile learning. Everybody knows that that's a best practice. However, we just ran a survey. We used one of our analyst partners to run a survey for us, and I bet you most people listening today are going to be shocked by this, that the survey we did, only 23% are actually really fully mobile ready with their training programs, which I found shocking. But so everyone knows you're supposed to be doing it, but a lot of people still aren't doing it. So we would give a little push in the direction of, making that happen with your technology. Of course, if you're a Litmus customer, it's much easier because ours is automatically responsive to design and all that stuff, and very mobile first, if not, not just mobile friendly, but quite mobile first as far as the technology itself and how easy it makes it for you to get that stuff onto a mobile device. And then, as we already mentioned, integration is so critical. And we talked about integrating with web conferencing, integrating with your CRM, so your sales or service person doesn't need to go log into a separate system to get a little micro learning session. They can do it right in the system that they spend the most time with. And then also, we integrate with e-commerce, with e-signature stuff. It can all be built into the LMS, and that's very transformative, so that you don't have all these disjointed situations for people to get through a training. They can sign their DocuSign right in there. And then gamification, of course, this is not new news either, but the reality is that even grown adults like to play games, and we've seen some really interesting things recently where even there are companies that are gamifying compliance training, because everybody's like, oh, I have to do my harassment training or what have you, and people are saying, no, you can earn badges and points, and just kind of making it fun. We may be serious business people, but people still like to have fun, and so gamification is a fabulous transformative feature.
Absolutely. If you talk about trying to keep people engaged, everyone has a little bit of a competitive spirit to them, and so that gamification really helps with keeping people engaged and in tune. The other thing that I find, the probably pure definition of engagement is the video assessments. It's one of my favorite features. I mentioned already having a past in sales and doing sales training. When we're talking about, being able to offer training remotely, whether it's needing to train resellers, partner resellers, or employees on how to handle certain situations and being able to do a role play, or having someone deliver a presentation to show that they were able to absorb the learning and be able to make it their own and play it back. The video assessments is a great way to do that. It puts you together without being together, and being able to test and score, and provide the feedback to the users on those video assessments. So I think that's another feature that's also underutilized in many organizations, and it's definitely something that can help with driving the engagement and being able to provide better qualitative feedback to employees, partners. And then off-the-shelf content, which I think we mentioned a little bit earlier. There are certain trainings that are not unique to an individual business, right? When we talk about many of the compliance training that needs to be done in an organization, some general basic skills. We talked a little bit about health and safety. These are all courses that you don't necessarily need to spend your time reinventing the wheel, creating these courses, right? You want to focus your time on the things, on the courses that are unique to your business, right? So having a robust off-the-shelf content library of courses that can be rolled out in your organization is critical, really, in being able to ensure that you're putting your time, where it's most valuable. And then the reporting and analytics, being able to see what is actually happening within the organization, how training is being adopted, who's doing what, who's not. We're finding those opportunities for improvement and being able to have that reporting and analytics out of the box and at your fingertips for yourself to be able to measure your ROI and successfulness of your program is so critical. I think that when we look at the technology, right, we're talking about people and we're talking about technology. I think the technology is super important, but at the end of the day, do you want to bring it back to, right? People are the most important asset, right?
Well, and I was just going to say, Jen, on just that last slide about like off-the-shelf content. I mean, with how busy, I mean, most L&D professionals and even HR professionals I speak to, it's like, people are so busy these days and often so overtasked. And it's like, our little line is like, why create when you can curate? And I'm sure most of you, or I'm sure a lot of you are already doing that. It's like, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. And then the only other point I was going to make on this, on the technology piece, Jen, is that how cool it is with video assessments that there's two ways that those videos can be assessed if you're using the right technology, because there's the human feedback where, manager to employee, where you got to tighten up that sales pitch a little bit and go back and re-record, give it another shot. And but then there's also the AI piece, which is super cool. So you can set it up where the AI piece of a video assessment is actually tracking for certain keywords. Are you umming and ahhing a lot, and that kind of thing, that is really cool AI technology that's definitely transformative as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love talking about this.
I know. I think it's because I don't like the AI calling out all of my ums and ahs.
That darn AI thing, really annoying. But Jen, anyway, to jump to this, of course, yes, we were talking about technology, but people are your most valuable asset. When we originally talked about Peter Drucker and his the original theory of transformative training, he asserted that people's knowledge is your most valuable asset as an organization, but he also had a little negative undertone in that he also thought that people are the most underused asset or most underused resource for most companies, which, again, that was 1999, but now I think a lot of companies are changing that. And the underused part is starting to change because of the importance of training and because of the learning technologies that are out there, that I think a lot of companies are starting to correct that underused part and to really bring the best out in people and allow people to flourish and bring their gifts to the forefront.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I have anything to add on that slide. So then let's talk a little bit about, I think this is where, Sam, we can talk a little about, the priorities for transformation. And what I'm hoping is that we can challenge everyone on the call to think about everything we've talked about here today and kind of what you can focus on as you go back into your organization and think about, what's important for you and for your priorities. I think that I'm just looking at the time also. So, I think the, DE&I, not to skip to the sixth bullet, and I'll let you, Sam, kind of carry all over the place, but I think that this is obviously a huge priority for a lot of organizations. It's a big topic in boardrooms right now.
Mhm.
And this is something that has to trickle all throughout the organization and is super critical for learning and development to be able to enable this training within the organization. But, helping people feel included and able to be their authentic self in the workplace is so important. And if we talk about people and changing what they do by what they know, this is I think one of those priorities that is probably on the forefront for everyone, and seeing the role that learning and development plays in it.
Yeah, it's huge. We actually, one of the studies we did just run with another analyst firm, D&I is actually the number one, based on that particular survey that we did. It was actually the number one training priority. And it should be. I mean, again, we started out the talk today talking about, social unrest and, people being, it's just absolutely critical. And it also ties back into the idea of purpose too. I mean, people aren't going to feel purposeful in their job if they feel excluded. You're not going to speak up. You're not going to bring your new idea to the table because you feel excluded and you feel other than or whatever. So this is a absolutely critical piece of transformative training, is transforming the organization to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, because you'll get the most and the best out of people when everybody feels a member of the team, a true member of the team. And then, the other thing, now we're going to work backwards, and we're going to go from 6 to 5 to, we're just going to work backwards. So it's like, because the other thing that we're seeing, and this is a really cool thing, we work for the enormous SAP, obviously very, very large global organization, and employee well-being is truly something that SAP focuses on and wants people, to be trained on mindfulness. Part of the Litmus course catalog, we offer courses on mental health, mindfulness, work-life balance. I mean, these things they've just come to the forefront, right? It's not our grandmother's training department anymore. Now these things mental health is valued and balance is valued. And then, to just jump backwards from there, of course it's going to be sustained remote learning. A lot of companies, sure, they're going to go back to doing in person, but the focus really has to be on sustained remote learning, because as for a lot of the reasons we've already talked about, that the technology really does enable some of this really cool stuff and some of these really great outcomes. So, and then that I'm going to jump to 2, because that kind of ties to this idea, digital competencies is something that for a truly transformative training program, being able to actually teach people and train people, educate on different digital competencies and across generations, because we always talk about, the younger generations, oh yeah, they already know how to do that, but making sure that you're doing it across your whole scope of your people. And some people might need training on data security and digital troubleshooting or searching for answers, and that is something that you can train people on, which is really, really cool. And I don't know, Jen, if you want to talk about, but learning agility is basically what our chat commenter was referring to before. I think it was Lisa, talking about people performing in new situations, being able to navigate unfamiliar challenges. That's the Drucker meaning of broader knowledge versus one-off skills. It's okay, this is a problem I haven't seen before. And have you trained to have that broader approach and to be able to think critically and creatively? And that's really, again, what we were chatting about before. And then similarly, and these are related, the idea of team mindsets is that learning agility, being able to navigate new situations, often involves working collaboratively with other people. So training for team mindsets, being able to train people to work together to coordinate and collaborate effectively is absolutely another critical piece of a truly transformative training organization.
Yeah. I think we have a poll, right, Sam? This is where we have
Yeah.
poll. Melissa, if you want to help us launch that, it'd be great to get a sense from everyone. sort of, what where their top priority is.
Mhm.
I think that everyone is in a different place as far as priorities. So it'll be interesting to see what everyone has to say. I think while we're doing that, there is a question here in the chat as well that's semi-related, but doesn't fall into one of these buckets. What I'm struggling with is trying to find what is better suited for providing information. LMS versus a CMS, small chunks versus scaffolding. There's merits to everything. But in my situation, I have a lot of learners over various businesses, but they're all unique people. Accommodating all is challenging. I think this does speak a little bit to that, a little bit about the agility and remote learning. Obviously, I think CMS has its place. There needs to be a central hub for content. And that LMS, I think, is what helps to really ensure that it's being measuring the learning, and that the learning is being rolled out. Sam, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say, I'm a little bit biased for the LMS
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, but no, it's a great question. And yeah, I mean, or I don't know if you can integrate and do a combination of the two as well. Now, interestingly, as the poll results are coming in, this is great to see. So as of right now, our lead horse is sustained remote learning, which that's just really great to see. Top ones right now, sustained remote learning and learning agility is getting lots of points here.
Yeah.
Team mindsets, that's wonderful to see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Some of the questions that we saw earlier today too, it just goes to show that this isn't a super simple, quick, overnight change. I mean, we've been, for the last 15 months or so, companies have had to adapt to this remote learning, and now we still haven't, companies are still struggling to perfect it in their organization, and leveraging it to be sustained is clearly still a priority. So I think that's very interesting. And obviously, as you mentioned, the survey that pointed out, 65% of organizations say that employees wish to continue with mostly digital learning, which we're seeing with a lot of companies wanting to continue with remote work even. So that is not surprising. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, well, so it looks like the final results here is that we have a tie. We have a tie between learning agility and sustained remote learning. That's fabulous to see.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that the DE&I number isn't higher, given our other survey that we were just referring to, and that was a larger scale survey. But that's, yeah, I mean, cool. This learning agility and sustained remote learning are absolute, pillars to transformative training. So really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. All right.
Thanks.
Well, hopefully,
Thanks for participating, everybody. Cool.
And there we go. Well, I think we're wrapping up here. We'll probably have maybe a time for another question or so, but I think to summarize, training for transformation is people transformation. Jill Popelka, who is the president of Success Factors, which is Litmus is part of the Success Factors organization within SAP. This is a quote from her talking about investing in people's growth, because no matter the size of the organization, it's always going to be about the people and people transformation in order to truly transform the business. And learning is the catalyst to making sure to drive that transformation and empower the workforce and people to persevere, as challenges and opportunities like what we've experienced over the last year and a half, and we'll continue to see, are emerging. That's how we prepare people for it, for what's coming in the future, whether foreseen or unforeseen. It's really all about the people and the people transformation.
Yeah, I just love this. I love this quote. it's just, I love the part of that it's a, business transformation is always a people transformation. It ties all of this stuff, together of what we've been talking about for the last hour, is that, purpose drives people and people drive business performance, and learning is absolutely critical to that. And then even getting back to our chat feedback on how Jill puts it here is, to empower the workforce to persevere as new challenges and opportunities emerge. And so this is again, the Drucker piece of, it's not about a skill, it's about empowering people with a broader knowledge so that they can flexibly respond to situations that are new conditions or a new challenge, and all the stuff that we've been talking about. This quote just kind of gets it, and giving people this, more of a purposeful, performance-driven role where people feel like they can participate and their feedback matters, and it's DE&I, and they matter to the broader team, and all these things. I just absolutely love this quote for all of those reasons.
Absolutely. Well, I think we literally only have about 2 minutes left. So, if there's any questions that we didn't get to in the chat or in the Q&A, feel free to offer them up now. We'll happy to be able to answer. But if not, really appreciate everyone joining us today. And as Melissa mentioned at the top of the hour, the call is recorded and will be provided within the next day or so. And thank everybody for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your participation.
Yeah, absolutely.